Apraxia of speech, otherwise known as acquired apraxia of speech, AOS, or verbal apraxia, is a neurological speech disorder affecting adults that is best described as a motor planning and programming disorder. This means that apraxia reflects an impaired capacity to plan or program the sensory motor commands necessary for directing movements, which results in phonetically and prosodically abnormal speech. Apraxia can have significant effects on speech. The hallmark characteristic of this disorder is groping for articulatory placement. Groping is defined as the movement of the articulators to try and find correct placement for a speech sound. Other effects that apraxia may have on an individual's speech include random sound substitutions, errors in articulatory placement, perseveration, which is the involuntary repetition of sounds, syllables, and/or words, vowel distortions, and inconsistent errors, where the individual might say a difficult word correctly but then have trouble repeating it, or they may be able to say a particular sound one day but have trouble with that same sound the next day. More issues that may arise from apraxia include an increase in errors as word or utterance length increases, prosody issues, which has to do with the speed or slowness of speech, voicing issues, nasality issues, omission errors, and complex sound classes like clusters, fricatives, and affricates being more difficult to produce than less complex sound classes like stops and approximants. Here's a video example of a woman speaking with acquired apraxia of speech.
Hi, my name is Gina. I am 43 years old. I have Apraxia of speech. I had stroke 6 months ago. I still smart, funny, but what I want to say, not get my brain to mouth, so hard talk.
Because with apraxia, there is not an issue with the affected individual's ability to move the muscles associated with speech, but rather an issue with their ability to plan and program motor movements, the disorder stems from an issue in the brain. In adults, apraxia is usually caused by strokes, traumatic brain injuries, and tumors, and neurological damage leading to apraxia can occur in Broca's area, the supplementary motor area, the insular cortex, and/or the basal ganglia. Broca's area is located in the posterior part of the lower frontal lobe in the left hemisphere of the brain and is known as the center of speech articulation, being responsible for controlling the movement of the muscles of the speaking apparatus and related movements of the lips, tongue, larynx, and pharynx. The supplementary motor area, which is located on the medial aspect of the brain, is the part of the motor cortex that plays a role in facilitating spontaneous motor responses to sound. The insular cortex, which is located deep within the lateral sulcus of the brain, is involved in sensory motor functions and orofacial programs like eating and drinking, and also links sensory experience with emotions. Finally, the basal ganglia, which is made up of a group of nuclei situated deep and centrally at the base of the forebrain, is responsible for facilitating and inhibiting motor movement, generating motor programs, and using dopamine from the substantia nigra to regulate posture, balance, arm swinging, and walking. Function barriers are problems in body or brain function. Because apraxia does not affect the motor movement of the articulators and the body is therefore not impaired, there are not problems with the body that result from apraxia. However, there are problems in the brain that result from this disorder that subsequently affect the performance of the articulators during speech. Apraxia affects the brain by way of causing the brain pathways involved in planning the sequence of movements used in producing speech to be impaired. This results in the brain being unable to properly plan and sequence the movements required for speech sound production. Activity barriers are problems with executing activities of daily living, or ADLs. ADLs are basic tasks that must be accomplished every day for an individual to thrive, or that are required to independently care for oneself. Some examples of ADLs include breathing, eating and drinking, washing and dressing, mobilization, working and playing, and communication. As a result of the impairments at the brain level that we just discussed, an individual with apraxia will certainly experience problems with the ADL of communication, which includes talking on the phone and speaking with others, both of which a person with apraxia would have trouble with. An individual with apraxia may also experience problems with the ADL of working and playing if communication is involved in their work or play, which it most likely would be to some extent. Participation barriers are problems with involvement in any area of life, like education or employment. Individuals with apraxia could have problems in either or both of these areas of education and employment. For example, someone with apraxia could be taking college classes and also working somewhere. Their speech disorder would affect their ability to communicate with professors and classmates at school, and their ability to communicate with their boss and coworkers at work, for example. Some speech and language intervention techniques that could be used by an SLP to help an individual with apraxia include having the client perform oral motor exercises used to retrain the muscles used to make sounds, asking the client to repeat sounds over and over to practice correct mouth movements, helping the client to slow down or pace their speech to provide them with enough time to produce the sounds needed to articulate their intended message, or even helping the client find ways to answer questions or express wants and needs through augmentative and alternative communication, like simple hand gestures, writing, pointing to letters or pictures, or using a computer.